Please ask. Muy bien, so here we are with Dr. Paul Browde. Did I say it right?
Yeah, you did.
It's such a joy and an honor to be here with you. I am, as I was saying before we started recording, I want to thank you for your generosity and for your time. I am a big fan. I love everything that you do. All your services just resonate with me and my story, my experience, my cause. So I'm a fan, and I hope to become a friend / client, customer, etc. Very excited for this.
Thank you.
First encounter, and I wanted to pass the word to you and ask you if you could introduce yourself for our audience, whoever thinks they can benefit from this exchange, and tell. You are a master storyteller, so tell a little bit of your story, whatever you consider could be helpful and useful at this occasion.
Thank you, Monica. It's wonderful to spend time with you as well. I'm very inspired by you. And so my name is Paul Browde, and I am from South Africa originally. That's my accent. I've lived in the United States for 35 years. Yeah. And I'm a doctor, I'm a psychiatrist, and I've been working as a psychiatrist also for 30 years at this point. But when I was 24 years old, my story is that when I was 24 years old, I was surprisingly diagnosed with HIV. And that was in 1985. And it was very, very early in that epidemic, and people were dying. There was no medication, there were no treatments, and there was really no understanding of how to deal with people or what to say. The doctors did not know what to say to me. And in fact, for the first several years, I was treated as a cancer patient because that was all they knew how to do, but it was totally inappropriate. So I went through tests and procedures that I shouldn't have had to go through and wouldn't have had we known. But as you can tell, I am still here, and much to my delight, I lived when so many people didn't. So one of the things, the aspects of that story that really inspires me is how many people died and how many extraordinary people died. You know, artists and thinkers and healers and people. And we lost them. We lost a whole generation of leaders. And so I feel very inspired to be as much of a leader as I can be, to be as bold as I can be in their name, because they didn't get to have that. It really, it moves me to feel that. In the early part of my having HIV, it was a complete secret. It was something nobody could know. It was deeply shameful. And my fear was that if anybody found out, I would lose friends, I would lose relationships, and I might lose my career. So I didn't tell anyone. I kept it, except for very few people, one of whom was my mother. I told very few people, and I lived with this secret inside of me that literally began to eat me up from the inside. Maya Angelou says, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And yes, that agony of bearing that story was just overwhelming. And, you know, talk about people coming along and treating you in ways that feel destructive and yet being such a gift. Somebody found out my diagnosis at a hospital where they worked, and threatened to tell people. So threatened to expose me to my workplace, threatened to expose me to people in my life, and wondered if I would perhaps lose my job.
Wow.
So that was a period of such terror of this person having the knowledge and not being able to tell anyone. And so eventually, as it happens, I was propelled into becoming public about it, because I realized that the minute I was public, nobody could hold it as a secret that they could use against me. Right. So I went to the American Psychiatric Association's conference and I gave a paper on my experience of being HIV positive psychiatrist. And it changed everything, because as a result of that, I was now able to tell my story, and I was able to tell my story as a way of encouraging other people to tell theirs. And much of my work over the last 30 years, or not since then, was 20 something years since I did that, has been working with people who have shameful stories, or stories that live for them as shameful, and encouraging them to tell theirs. And there's nothing more encouraging than someone who's already done that and says, I know, and I still encourage you to tell your story. And sometimes it's dangerous. I've been to countries, for example, in Eastern Europe, where gay people or sex workers or IV drug addicts need to tell their stories, but if they tell them too publicly, they're in real danger. So you've always got to weigh up that. But for example, in the United States, for many people, it's the internal shame rather than the reality that keeps them from speaking. And so that's been when I say that HIV has been a gift in my life, it truly has been the great spiritual teacher of my life. And I say spiritual because, we are body and we are spirit. And the body is what happens when we get sick. We get these illnesses, we get these viruses that start to affect the body. And I really believe that the way that people relate to us when the body starts to be affected. So if you get very, very sick, particularly partners, have to face death. We have to face the death that we're all going to go through. And people do not like to see death in the mirror. So it's very common that when someone gets a debilitating illness, the partner wants to get the hell out of there, to run away, often to do something quite life-affirming, like buy a sports car and drive across the country, or have an affair, or just do something that gives them the reminder that they're alive, because the looking in the mirror is just too terrifying. And so the work, of course, is for people to be able to face the bodily trauma, what's happening to the body, but to remember that the spirits are not sick. The spirits are right here. And can we, as spiritual partners, find a way to communicate? And maybe not, and maybe the lesson is that not with that person. But I know we had started talking about how to relate to people when you have been sick. And so let me stop there, because I know I've said a lot, and I want to just hear.
No, that is awesome, because that is connecting. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your story. And this is a very strong invitation for all of us to open up and to share our stories and to be vulnerable. I just want to emphasize something, and it's the incredible similarities with what is happening after COVID and with COVID long haulers right now, because actually some of the treatments that some of us are undergoing are with HIV medications, because doctors are finding a lot of similarities between the two conditions. And they are saying, you guys need to be patient, because it took us 40 years with AIDS to find out and to start really saving lives. It doesn't mean that it's going to take 40 years of research for long COVID, but it is starting. And just like you were describing when you got your diagnosis, is the reality that long haulers are experiencing. Nobody understands, not even doctors. Nobody believes it, because it's almost an invisible illness. Anyway, so thank you. What a powerful story, Paul. And you started to touch a very important topic, and something that I wanted to offer our listeners, and it's the relationship part. So yes. I have shared already with my audience that I experienced myself a lot of loss in the relationship arena. My marriage ended. My husband asked for divorce in the peak of my illness, and that was the end. And I saw a lot of friendships and even relatives walking away, as you say, because facing impermanence is too much for humans. We are not trained. Yes. We're not taught. Nobody taught us to face death. or to face illness, or how to handle it. And for many people, the way of dealing with discomfort and fear is walking away or just disappearing. So yes, if you could address a little bit of this mystery of illness and relationship, both those who walk away and also those who choose to stay, even if they don't have a clue what to do with that. And how, what an opportunity it is now, for example, after 2 years of COVID story, for people to start reviving those relationships that are important for them and the ones that are available, of course. So what could you say?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, I think so much of it is how, is first of all, people knowing when someone encounters somebody who's sick, somebody who they love who's sick, the one response is what I spoke about, which is this mirror of death and I want to get the hell out of here. The other is really wanting to help and to fix and to make it better. And that also can be incredibly frustrating because there's often not anything you can do. And especially people who want to do things. A lot of men want to do, but not only men, people want to do something to fix. And so I think that trying to fix, trying to make someone feel better is actually an obstacle to relating. And the work that I do with couples is called encounter-centered couples work. And it doesn't have to be in couples. The idea of it is that you and I are completely separate universes. You're a universe, I'm a universe. And if you just close your eyes for a moment, the vastness of who you are is so immense. It's forever, it's infinite, that you could never really get to know yourself because it's just evolving and vast.
Right.
However, in that vastness, there are what we call neighborhoods of experience. And so one neighborhood could be precious moments of my life. A neighborhood could be the neighborhood of long COVID and what that's like to live there. The neighborhood of how much I love my dog, that's a neighborhood. Once you find the neighborhood, we have the capacity as human beings to put aside our wish to fix, change, help, and also to put aside any judgments and to just bring ourselves to the other, to visit a neighborhood in their world. So, I'm thinking how wonderful it could be to structure some visits with people in your life, once you've lived through something like this, who are interested in really learning what it's been like for you. They don't have to try and change it or fix it. There's nothing they can do. You've lived through this and this is it. But their presence, their full presence without trying to change or fix you, really makes all the difference, not only to you, to them. And they get to have some of your experience, which is such a rich experience. So by bringing themselves over this metaphorical bridge to land in your world. And so I literally have couples sit, and I've done it with siblings and parents and children too. You sit, you look into each other's eyes, and I would say, Monica, I would like to invite you to cross the bridge and come into my world. And I'd like to tell you about my neighborhood of living with HIV. And then your job would be to leave your world behind, not to bring any of yourself other than your full presence and attention and be with me. And the only thing you would do is you would reflect what I'm saying so that we know that you're with me and we know that you're able to follow, because otherwise you might get pulled back to your side of the bridge by some of the things I'm saying. And when you do that, you have what this Jewish philosopher by the name of Martin Buber called an encounter of the souls. It's a moment where two people come together and their souls encounter one another and everything is quiet. The world goes quiet. They're in present time with one another. And they have an experience of that together, so that after that, they'll always have had that experience. It's not just a conversation, it's an encounter. And you used the word encounter actually at the very beginning of this when you introduced me. So that's what I would think I get excited at the idea of creating venues for people to come together who are people who've lived through something, like people who are living with long COVID. And I think this is such an important one, because I think there is I think the whole society is in such terror of being faced with the mortality that COVID has provided. 1 million people in the United States have died of COVID. That I don't know about everybody, but the culture is sort of running as if it's not happening. Everybody's just, let's live, let's just get together, let's just go to sports matches and be indoors and do all these things. Because the alternative is to actually face the grief.
Right.
Because when 1 million people have died among us, it makes sense that we would actually be grieving right now.
Right.
So on a one-to-one basis, what we can do is just agree to just visit one another and listen and be. That's my.
I love it. I love it. And yes, you're right. There's not wanting to face reality. You mentioned it's already 1 million deaths in the United States, and it's 100 million COVID long haulers in the world, Paul. People that are suffering in silence, basically. And the suicide I was sharing that day in our course, the suicide rate among the COVID long hauler population has increased drastically. And I ask the rest of us, how blind can we remain to that? So yes, I think your invitation is beautiful, and I totally resonate with that. And it's also what I am trying to offer and to put out there. And it's time for us to be present for each other. What you described so beautifully is such a great gift. It's just presence. One of the relationships that not only didn't end, but that it was already strong and amazing and got so reinforced in my life was with my mom. She's been my rock and my everything. The poor lady had to pick the pieces of me on the floor because I was, as I was sharing with you, completely broken. I not only got extremely sick, I thought I was dying physically, and then diagnosed with a severely clinical depression. Got divorced in the midst of it, lost all my income, my job, my home, everything. She grabbed the pieces of me, but she didn't know what to do. And we have learned together how to create a more real and authentic relationship. And the main first thing that I said is, you don't need to fix anything. You can't. Just please be there for me. Your presence, your love is the only thing I want and need. And it's been magical and fabulous. So thank you for bringing this up. And I think, as you were saying, it's been your greatest spiritual teacher. I say the same. It sounds very drastic, especially for those listening who are going through the darkest part of it. But I wouldn't change it for anything. It's been the toughest period of my whole existence. And it's also been the greatest teacher. It has meant the biggest transformation. So that is yours and mine message today as well. And you were saying it also very beautiful before we started recording, the dark night of the soul, and how that is the beginning of some incredible lives, really, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's what's required to be a powerful healer.
Right.
Is if to be a wounded healer, a healer who has gone through your own wounds and comes out on the other side. Really, you have tools that you could never have had otherwise. It is part of the apprenticeship of being a healer.
Right.
But I actually want to say something to people who are living with something like long COVID, who can't see that right now, who are in so much distress and despair. And I do not want to be an added pressure on people to heal. Like, come on, get through this and then it'll be the greatest thing you'll ever live, because that's trite and it's not true for everybody.
Right.
And so what I'd say to you is that there are people like you and me who, for whatever reason, have been able to see it in that way. That isn't the right way to see it. It's just a possible way to see it that can make a tremendous difference. And what we need to do is find ways to help other people, to take care of other people, and to
Right.
help them in their dark nights, or at
Right.
least to hold, not help, it's to hold space for their experience and not run away.
Right.
That's, you know, because I've read, you know, there's some teachings about different narratives of illness, and that when you have an illness, there's a story that people want your illness to follow. And one of the stories, the one they all want, is that you get very sick, then you get the treatment, and then you recover, and then you're wise and you're grateful, just like we're saying.
Right.
But not everyone can do that. And for some people, the story is way more chaotic. It's way more desperate. And people are left feeling like, some people really do feel like they can't come out of it.
Right.
And what I want them to know is they're also welcome. They're also welcome in our society. They're welcome in our world. You don't have to be strong and recovered and resilient to be a person who's welcome. Everybody's welcome.
Wow, how important. And thank you for saying that, because I see the tendency in me to over encourage, maybe because I was so low and so facing death so closely, you know, that it gets to me very deeply when I know that there are people suffering that much and on the edge of losing their lives because they might just end it. So thank you for that reminder. It's very powerful. It's very inclusive. And yes, of course, we are all welcome. And I noticed with much compassion on myself how sometimes unconsciously we're not ready to stop the suffering. We are not ready to heal. And that was very confrontational for me when I noticed that there is actually a hidden benefit by being sick. And it brought me to my knees.
Totally.
It brought me to my knees.
Absolutely.
It was so humbling when I said, oh, wow, when I am sick, I can call for attention. I get more solidarity, etc. A lot of other payoffs, right? And just facing that on myself was such a confrontation and so humbling. And we need to be, as you say, welcoming to all of that, all of that, because that is our human nature, right? But then comes, if it comes, the moment when we feel ready to stop the suffering.
Yes.
I don't know if you agree, but I experienced that pain is intrinsic to our human experience, what to do. But then suffering is more the response we choose to have to that pain. And that
I'm with you. And I remember very, very clearly when I saw the payoff that I was getting out of not only having HIV, but feeling the shame and feeling down as a result of it. Because I think for one of the first times in my life, I felt worthy of compassion, of my own compassion.
Right.
And that, you know, when it struck me, you don't have to have a life-threatening illness to be worthy of compassion. You can be worthy of compassion just for being a human being.
Exactly.
You're worthy of compassion. We all are. And it was, and so, but it had been such a source of my own compassion that to let it go as that and just say, you know, it's something that happened and it's part of your life, but it doesn't have to be the lens through which you are known by everybody.
Exactly.
Or it's so complex.
It is so
the most and I think finding realizing that we are made up of many, many parts rather than one thing. There's, I don't believe anymore in the true self. There's no such thing. The self is made up of many different parts, and they have different characteristics. So for a part of me, having HIV still remains like the source of compassion. Oh, I feel for him. Part of me says, just stop using it in that way. You don't need to use it anymore. It's like, you're done. You're 61 years old. Get over it. And all these parts live inside of me, and they all speak to each other, and they all have, and if I spoke to each of them, they all have an interesting perspective. Right. None of them is right, though. They're just all parts, and they come together, and I can just be, compassionate to all of them. They're all welcome. I find that a very helpful construct to think of it that way.
Absolutely, and very powerful. And you're right, the different parts. And right now I am kind of very much focused on that shifting, because once I was facing that convenience of being sick, right, I said, what if I allow myself just to start relating to others and the world from the possibility of being a healed person, a recovered long hauler. And then all this possibilities started to happen. Just what you were saying, I don't need to use the illness or my health condition to attract consideration, compassion, attention, support. Anyway, very complex and very deep, as you were saying. And that, I think, is a nice link now for my third and last question, because I want to honor your time again. I'm so grateful. But it's fascinating for me to be talking just an amazing human being like you, but you're a doctor. I mean, you are a physician, you're a clinician. You've been working for over 30 years as a psychiatrist. So I know your approach is very holistic, but what is most interesting to me is, what would you say the role of the inner work is in overall healing? Meaning mindset, approaches, attitudes, belief systems, words. We were talking about the story that you tell yourself and all that. From the perspective of you as a doctor, as a medical doctor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that my work as a medical doctor is to partner with people to shift the inner conversation that they have with themselves. And so medicine can help with that. So if someone is in a clinical depression and they're unable to get out of bed, and they're unable to think, and they're unable to concentrate or to function, the medication can be an aspect of the healing, because it literally can allow people to start to have their energy back, their life energy back. But once that happens, they still need to work on the content of their experience, because it's what we've been talking about up to now. There needs to be a shift in how they relate to themselves and to their life. And that's where ideas such as the parts model, looking at the different parts and finding compassion for the parts, or finding gratitude, or also recognizing that the inextricable relationship between body and mind. The mind is not located in the brain. It's not in the head. The mind is way bigger than I actually think mind is bigger than the body, but the mind is in the body. And so if you take care of the body, if you have focus on how you eat, on what you put into your body, if you focus on the activities that you do, if you spend time every day being mindful, which is to calming the system, calming the brain down, these all have effects on the body, but that then has an effect on the mind. You can't distinguish them. So my work as a doctor, and I think all doctors, no matter what you do, even if you're doing surgery, you're working with the mind body. And knowing that just alters the way that you relate to patients, and also alters what you say to patients, and also alters the patient's expectation. So if I offer someone a medication, for example, I'm aware that the power of the offering of the medication is in that pill, but it's also in me having a connection with them and offering the pill. And how I do it and how they receive it really has an impact on the outcome of it. And people often talk about, oh, it's the placebo response, as if that means it's meaningless. The placebo response is one of the most magical phenomena, because it means that 30% of people are getting better, even though they're not taking a chemical per se that's changing things. Their mind is doing something. You know, the placebo response is often almost as high as the therapeutic response of drugs. And rather than minimizing it, it's yes, harness that. Let's harness that. And I think people with COVID, with certain illnesses right now, there's not enough yet known, and there's a lot of sort of calling it psychosomatic. I know, you know, fibromyalgia was something that people always said was fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. There are certain conditions, and because some people get COVID and literally don't even notice it, and then other people get COVID and are, I mean, I have seen people with extreme neurological difficulties that are getting worse, actually, not better. So I see that, but because there's such a difference, and because there isn't yet the science, people are psychosomatic, you know, it's obviously psychosomatic, as if that makes it less important.
Or less.
And I think that again, or less real, did you say?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it, you know, it's all psychosomatic. Everything is psychosomatic, you know, it's all psychosomatic. It's body and mind.
Body and
mind. So rather than denigrating it, is saying, whatever it is, this person is suffering. And one day, I mean, we saw that with HIV. I mean, HIV in the beginning was not taken seriously at all, and millions of people died. You know, there's just, people were told, just change your diet, eat better, you know, just stop doing what you're doing. And now we know the science and we understand exactly what happens and why people got so sick. But until we do, and even when we do, you are your own partner in your own healing. And if you can lead yourself, yes, the doctor's on your team, and you want a team. You want a doctor, you want people to help you with body work, you want people to help you with nutrition, you want friends, you want support. They're all your team. But it's not the doctor who's the one who has all the knowledge. You do. You have the knowledge in your own body, and it's very, very important.
Right. I find this so fascinating what you're saying, because I experienced it myself. So what I usually share with fellow long haulers and all other people in general is how I noticed it myself. At the time, I was taking 40 different medications and supplements, Paul, and nothing was working. I was just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And what I noticed at some point was I was totally blocked energetically. I was fighting with life. I was hating life. I was hating the universe, God, whoever you want to call it. Feeling extremely miserable, being a total victim of my circumstances, just resisting everything, asking the wrong questions, just dwelling in it, you know? And so how any treatment, any medication, any practice, any therapy really can work with such blockage. And as soon as I started to apply these things, you know, and to change my vocabulary and to change my mindset and to consider other possibilities, to start regaining trust, because I had lost it all, a little bit of appreciation and gratitude and allowing and stop interfering. And it was just miraculous, because the same exact medications I was taking for months then started to work. And everything else. So it's very much in accordance to what you're saying. And I find it fascinating, because you have experienced it both as a patient and as a doctor. And I also as one of the 100 million. what a treasure.
And as a healer, you're experiencing it now as a healer.
Mm.
There's no doubt.
Mm.
And it's really important, I think, to acknowledge that you are now taking on a leadership role, which is what healing is. Healing is leading. It's leading people into other possible stories. It's leading people into other possible ways of knowing. And you're doing that, right? So I feel very heard. I feel very heard and very acknowledged by this conversation with you. I really do appreciate it greatly. And as much as I hear you that it's a gift for you, it's a gift for me, really is. And so I look forward to continuing it,
Sí, absolutely.
Yeah.
Me too. Gracias, gracias. I very much
De
appreciate it.
nada.
I think we can stop the recording here and maybe just say goodbye after.
Yeah.